Welcome to all of our Becoming Your Best podcast listeners, wherever you may be in the world today. This is your host, Steve Schallenberger, and we have a special guest with us today. I've been looking forward to this interview. She is an author, a board member, speaker, former IBM executive VP, angel investor, and distinguished alumni who is devoted to creating gender equality and leadership by helping career women emerge as leaders. And as an immigrant of humble beginnings and a first-generation college graduate, she rose to become one of the highest-ranking women of color at IBM while raising her two children as a single mother. So welcome, Shelmina Babai Abji.
Thank you, Steve. It is an honor to be here.
It's probably Abji, right? We want to get that last name right.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you. And we're going to have a great interview today. And I think what we discuss today will be helpful and surprising to every single one of our listeners. I might just indicate that Shelmina has led global teams in various businesses and mutual sectors. She's delivered over $1 billion in revenues annually and has consistently maintained high client satisfaction as well as team morale. She was a decision maker in hiring and promoting hundreds of professionals. And at the peak of her career, she left IBM to pursue her passion for creating gender equality and leadership. And Shelmina now speaks at corporations, colleges, conferences, and globally, and has appeared at TEDx. She has mentored hundreds of individuals, women, and otherwise, and impacted the careers of thousands. So we are so delighted to have you with us, Shelmina. Let's start off by having you tell us about your background, including any turning points in your life that's had a significant impact on you.
Well, thank you, Steve. So, Steve, I grew up in humble beginnings in a small town in Tanzania called Mwanza. And, watching my parents struggle to make ends meet, especially my mom, who used to cook for people and we saw food on the streets, I was convinced that if I obtained a college degree, I would be able to lift myself and my family out of poverty. So that first decision was a big turning point for me, that decision to obtain a college degree. And that was a very lofty decision because there was no education past 10th grade in the town I grew up in. No one in my family had obtained a college degree. People like us didn't qualify a bank loan. But none of these obstacles stood a chance to stand in my way because I was stubbornly determined to achieve what I set out to do.
Okay, I love it. And how did you end up in the United States?
Yeah. So, my first degree was from India. I got a degree in mathematics. And upon completion of that degree, going back to Tanzania, I realized that I was not going to make enough money to lift ourselves out of poverty. And the year was 1981. IBM was just announcing the PC Junior. Computing was in its infancy. And I read an article that said, if you're good at math, you could program computers, get a degree in computer science, and you will make a lot of money. And at that time, United States was the only country that I knew of that was offering a degree in computer science. And so that's what got me to come here. I went to a small university in Wisconsin, La Crosse, because my brother knew someone who was already going there, who told me that he would help me get admission. And that's how I came here.
Okay, love that background. And then you're off to the races.
Well, it wasn't that simple. Upon graduation, Steve, I had a 1-year work visa because I was a foreign student. Upon graduation, obviously no one was coming to my university to interview students because we are such a small university. I went to a conference and I handed out over 300 resumes. No one would even interview me, even though I was on the dean's list. I had worked 35 to 40 hours a week while having a full computer science workload to support myself and my education. And the reason they didn't interview me is because I didn't have the right visa status.
Oh.
On the last day, there was a technology startup company called ETA Systems in the twin cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis in Minnesota. They interviewed me and they hired me. And the $27,000 that they offered as my starting salary for a year was more money than my parents could make in 10 years. And I
Wow.
thought, that's it. We're never going to be poor again. Except for when I showed up to work, Steve, in a company of 2,000 engineers, I was the only woman of color. Everyone there, obviously, they were more experienced, but they had better education in terms of they went to higher ranked universities, the MITs, the Carnegie Mellons, Yale, Harvard, you name it. They spoke better English, they wore better clothes, and I started looking around and thinking, what would I know that they don't already know? What value am I going to create? And I was stuck between a rock and a hard place because within 1 year, if I didn't figure out how to become difficult to replace, if I didn't figure out how to create unique value that someone else couldn't easily create, my company, by law, was required to hire someone with the right visa status, and they wouldn't go through the expenses, the resources that it would take to extend my visa. So that's where I started.
Lovely. And so you had to make a breakthrough there. How did you do it?
And so what happened, Steve, is the fact that I had undermined my own capabilities, the fact that I had convinced myself that there was nothing I could add, no value I could contribute towards the success of my organization. I had convinced myself that my ideas won't matter. That instilled fear of speaking up. Anytime I had an idea, this voice of fear would ring loud in my head. Don't say anything. You're going to state the obvious. They already know everything you know. They might even think you're stupid. They might even fire you before the 1 year is over. And so I sat quietly in all these meetings. I do a really good job in my own project, but whenever I was in a meeting or even a one on one conversation, I was afraid to speak up. However, one afternoon, I had this great idea. And while my voice of fear stopped me from speaking up, it's as if my idea flew from my head into the head of the guy sitting right across from me. And he stated exactly what I was thinking. And when he was done, everyone started giving kudos to him. And I heard someone say, "What a unique way of solving this problem." And I thought to myself, obviously, I did what women do, go to the women's restroom, look at myself in the mirror, and said, "Shelmina, you should have spoken up. Your ideas do matter." And that inner victory in my own head, going from my ideas don't matter to my ideas do matter, is what I needed to then face that voice of fear by feeding my voice of courage to speak up the next time I had an idea. I recognized that courage is not the absence of fear. I recognized that fear and courage were in my own head, and I could feed the voice that I wanted by giving it reasons why it should do what I must do. And that's when I coined this term called power quotient. It's when you get a disempowering stimulus, it's just a voice in your head that wants to react. But you can stop, scan your mental chatter, and feed that voice that allows you to show your worth. And never give your power away to a situation or a circumstance.
Shelmina and I were having the opportunity for all our wonderful listeners today of talking about how these principles apply across the board for everyone. They certainly would apply to women, but also to men, those who are insecure or unsure about themselves. And so I love the fact you're talking about this because I think most of us, maybe not everybody, but most of us have kind of had a similar experience that you just described. I really don't have something to contribute, or it's not that big a deal. But the fact is, if you're feeling it, you need to. I love your power quotient. Be able to sort through that and say, I will share it. It's okay, and there's value in what I do. So I like what you're saying on that. That's wonderful, beautiful. Now, how did you make a breakthrough in your career and continue to progress? You ended up at IBM. How did that happen?
So, there was a lot of learning, Steve. The first learning was this importance of unique value creation, because that was the only way I was going to get my company to do the visa, to process that paperwork, to keep me in this country so I don't go back to being poor. And so I started going to work every single day with the intention of creating unique value, maximum value at my maximum capacity. And I did a really good job at that. And obviously, they did my green card. And then what happened is about 4 years later, they ran out of money and they shut down. But by then, I already had my green card. And that's when I joined IBM. So when I joined IBM, I was already wired to create value at my maximum capacity. I was already wired to lean into my authenticity and my uniqueness to create unique value. So because of that, I got an award called the Rookie Systems Engineer of the Year Award. And that award invited me. Because of that award, I was invited to a women's roundtable. Our general manager, Susan Whitney, was visiting from Chicago. And there were all these high achieving women in that room, and I was one of them. And while I didn't say anything in that room, it felt good to be in that room. And my boss's boss had asked me to walk Susan back to his office at the end of the meeting. And so as we were walking back, Susan first congratulated me. Congratulations, Shelmina, for winning such a prestigious award. And I thought, oh, wow, she knows about my award. And then, just as casually as someone would ask you about your restaurant preference, she goes, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I looked at her like a glazed look in my eye. And I said, I don't know. I get so focused on doing the best possible job in my current role that I don't think about what I want to be in 5 years. She says, Shalmina, it is critical that you do the best possible job in your current role. And it is equally critical to know what you want to do next and next. So you are always working towards something bigger. You have so much potential. That 2-minute walk changed the way I thought about my career, because I wasn't really thinking of next and next. I was just thinking of what do I do today, the best possible job. And that's when I started understanding the importance of preparing yourself, of building the competencies that are going to be required for you to keep moving ahead next and next. So there were a lot of learnings in my career, and that is what is in my book. The biggest learning, frankly, Steve, was when I got my first promotion. It took me 10 years to ask for my first promotion because I never saw anyone that looked like me in any roles that I had, nor the roles I was aspiring. So I was inadvertently settling for small successes. I was overqualified by the time I asked for my first promotion, and I got it. I got it. But once I got that promotion and I sat in the meetings where promotions were being discussed, that's when I realized what truly matters. And once I knew that, I got promoted every 2 years or moved into a role that set me up for a promotion every 2 years. But prior to that, I had no idea what really matters. And a lot of women don't. We think that if we just say yes to everything and we put our nose to the grind and we work 60 hours a week, someone's going to recognize the great work we do and tap us on our shoulder and say, "Hey, Shelmina, let me promote you." It's not how it works. In fact, that works against us.
Okay, well, you said a couple of really important things, at least from my perspective. One is in your roles, and by the way, you were really motivated to get that green card. Ah, you had
I
a big
was.
motivation. Second is that you showed up to work every day, not only motivated, so you had something that motivated you, but you had a focus, and that is that you wanted to create value, which is amazing. And then third, your mentor on the 2-minute walk asked what your vision was. So yeah, that's a really set of powerful things. Now, one of the things you just so thank you for sharing those, Shelmina. Those are awesome. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, let's just ask another question and we'll
Okay, here's my next question, and that is that you just talked about it, that people should know what to do, what matters most. So what are some of those things? And then I want to hear about your book here in a moment.
Yeah. So actually, this is combined, right? The things that matter are in my book. And so the first time I sat in a meeting, we were actually talking about who goes to what we call the 100% club, right? The salespeople that overachieve their targets, they get to the 100% club. The outliers obviously are on the list. But then there are people that are neck to neck, and there are few slots and a lot of people. And I realized that what people say about you when you are not in the room determines your career trajectory. I realized the importance of your personal brand and what people, no one in that room should say anything against you, and someone or multiple people in that room should say something that is in favor of you. And that's how you get differentiated. And so I have an entire chapter in my book. The first one is intentional value creation because of what we just discussed. Then there is an entire chapter on intentional growth because of what Susan told me. And then there is an entire chapter on intentional personal branding because every impression that you are leaving behind in all your interactions is forming a personal brand. And so you need to show up to work with the intention of creating a leadership brand and sustaining a leadership brand. And that becomes even more important as you rise up the corporate ladder.
Right. In other words, I love that language, which is each of us really does create a brand as we move along in our career. And we need to be thoughtful about what are the things we are doing and what does that brand look like. So when they see us, what do they think about?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
what are some of the most important things, Selmina, that somebody should do, be mindful of to create a strong, effective brand that's creating value?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Steve, the first thing is you must define who you are, what you stand for, what your values are. What attributes do you want people to talk about when you are not in the room? And then you have to show up like that. This is not about pretending because, you know, when the environment gets chaotic, which it does in our workplaces that are moving so fast and so many things are constantly changing and all the uncertainty, you want to actually work towards becoming the person you want to be talked about. And this is a journey. But if you don't define yourself and if you're not intentional about how you want to show up, you will be defined by others because you will be reacting to people and you will be showing up in a way you don't want to be talked about. And so I tell women and men that you must decide who you want to be and then become that person. So the attributes are what you have decided, and not just show up on autopilot and react to situations. Because listen, the situation is not always going to be the way you want it to be. People are not always going to be the way you want them to be. And if you start behaving like them, or if your behavior depends on the situation or the person, then your brand is going to be all over the place. But if you use your power quotient, and no matter what people are doing, or no matter what the circumstances, you don't react to it. You intentionally respond in a way that is aligned with the brand you want to create, especially when the going gets tough, because people remember this.
Yeah, you mentioned two things that really stand out for me that I want to swing back to. It's on this very same line that you're talking about now, of being mindful of it, and about what's going on in those rooms where people talk about you, right? And that is how you're known, and then who knows you. So,
Yeah.
what advice do you have to really do well in both of those categories?
Yeah. So we just talked about how you're known, right? This is about intentionally showing up in every interaction
Okay.
in a way that is aligned with your brand. And your brand is not just about your business expertise, it's also about your personal attributes.
Mm.
And so you want to display the best of you. First of all, you have to know what your best personal attributes are, and you make sure that you are demonstrating those in all your interactions. So that's how you're known. Who knows you becomes really important, especially as you rise from middle management into executive level positions. When you are vying for an executive level position, you're going to run a large chunk of your company's business. Your performance is going to determine your company's earnings per share, the revenue. If you're a public company, it's going to get reported. The stock price depends on it. So the stakes are high. And everyone that is applying for the job already has a great leadership brand. Otherwise, their name would not be on the list. They already have a successful track record. Otherwise, their name would not be on the list. And the differentiation, what makes a difference then, is who around that table is going to put their credibility on the line and say, I trust Shelmina to get this job done. Because no one's done that job. Only one person is going to get that job. And the person who puts their credibility on the line is not going to do it because they like me. Because if I don't perform, it goes against them and their credibility. But they're going to do it because they have watched me. They have watched me struggle. They have watched me get outside my comfort zone. They have watched me build new competencies. They have watched me be confident when the stakes are high and when the environment is emotionally charged. They have watched me bring energy to my team when they are demoralized. And all this is really important because when you take on that executive level role, you will be required to learn competencies that you didn't have before. In fact, nobody has that. But if you have demonstrated that you have the ability to learn new competencies, if you've demonstrated trust in yourself, if you've taken a chance on yourself by stepping outside your comfort zone, then they will also take a chance on you. And so when people watch how you show up day in and day out, when the times are good, when the times are not so good, when you achieve your outcomes, when you don't achieve the outcomes, when the economy changes, when the client changes, all these uncertainties, how do you respond? When they have watched you and you have responded true to your brand, true to who you are, then they will take a chance on you because they have watched you.
I like that, and I, your discussion today, the comments you're bringing up, took me back to about 30 years ago, and I was associated with a wonderful company called Covey Leadership Center.
Ah,
Stephen Covey was the chairman of that group, and I had worked together with a number of people, and so getting back to who you know, as well as the skills, the contribution you're trying to make. I'll never forget that one fellow, he and I didn't always see eye to eye, but I loved him. He inspired me. He was so talented. And but I didn't know how he really felt about me. And there happened to be a meeting, and they were looking for someone to head up one of their international groups. And I ended up being asked to take those responsibilities, and later found out it was this fellow that made the recommendation in the meeting. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to that you're building, your career, you're making a difference within your organization, and trying to leave it better than you found it, and create strong, good relationships. Ask for people's advice, learn from them. So the type of things you're talking about are awesome. What inspired you to become an advocate for gender equality in leadership roles?
Before I answer that question, let me tell you that Stephen Covey's book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, was one of my favorite books when I was coming up the corporate ladder. I have so much respect for him and his principles, and I learned so much from that book. So thank you for bringing that up. I did not know that. And the second thing that you talked about, that you weren't sure how this guy felt about you. One of the best career advice I got from my sales leader is aspire to be respected, not to be liked. So even though he may not have liked you, he respected you, and that's why he advocated for you.
Yeah, that's great. And then later we became very close friends.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
If you get to know people, most people are pretty good. You just approach things from different points of view. And okay, now back to your question.
Now back to what inspired me to be an advocate for gender equality in leadership roles. Steve, this wasn't an aha moment that just happened one day. This was a journey. And just like my career success, where every level of success unfolded more possibilities. Every level of success got me to dream bigger, got me to dream bolder. When I left my career at IBM, all I wanted to do was to really honor the people that had helped me. And in my book, Intentional Relationships, where I talk about the sponsors, I use the great American author Alex Haley, who says, when you see a turtle on a ledge, you know it had help getting there. That's the story of my career. And so I wanted to honor the people that had helped me by helping a few other people become successful. And so as I started mentoring them and sharing my insights, I learned that they too were facing the same internal and external barriers that I faced. They too were facing microaggressions and negative stereotypes. And a lot of this is because there is not enough people that look like us in leadership roles. And so it's not people's fault. They've just never seen anyone that looks like us. And so they start undermining our capabilities. And then we have to educate them. We have to inform them of our capabilities by showing our worth, by contributing value, etc. And when I saw that my insights were actually transforming their career trajectories, that my insights were enabling them to emerge as leaders, I decided to write the book, because I figured if I can help hundreds of women, then I could help thousands of women. And when the book started getting traction and thousands of women are getting impacted and helped, and also when I was on the board of United Nations Foundation Girl Up, it was all about gender justice. Then I thought to myself that, you know what? I can actually become a change agent. I can dream bigger, and I can change this equation of gender equality in leadership roles. And so that's how the journey brought me to where I am today.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm just reflecting. It's been such a delightful discussion today. And as I think about some of the relationships I've had of working with other organizations, partners in our industries, but outside of our company, some of the best leaders have been women, and some of them of color who have been such dear friends for me. I mean, I adore them, but they're also really inspirational leaders. And hopefully all of our listeners will, accept people for what they can contribute and who they are and the difference they are, and set everything else, the color of their skin aside and their gender aside, and just judge them for what they can do, because they can make life so wonderful and rich and lead successful teams and organizations. So, Shelmina, I can't believe it. We're at the end of our interview already, and I have so many questions still to ask. But what final tips might you have for our listeners today that you would like to leave with them?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. For everyone that's listening, I want everyone to know that we all have capacity to lead. When I was growing up, I had no idea. I couldn't even dream of becoming a senior executive. Leadership is a learned skill. And Stephen Covey talks about this as well. Like we learn to become leaders. So opt into the leadership pipeline. I am teaching you what matters. I am teaching you what strategies you can intentionally execute so you will rise up that ladder, and there will be no more broken rungs. There will be people that look like us, that speak differently, that have diversity of thought, that will be in those rooms where decisions are being made. And together we will advance gender equality in leadership roles. This is not something I can do on my own. I need the help of every single person to get there.
And I love your perspective. And how can people find out about what you're doing?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I have a website. My name is unique enough. My website's actually shelmina.com. I post a lot on LinkedIn, and I'm a very I speak in a lot of places. So follow me, invite me, interact with me. Let's join forces. Together we are so much more powerful.
Yeah. Amen. Well, it's been a delight to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's been an honor.
Yeah, you bet. And we wish you the best in that passion that you have and that mission. And hopefully we can help contribute to that as well.
I would welcome that.
And to all of our listeners, it is always a privilege to have you join us. You add so much to our lives, and we admire the fact that you're working on becoming your best in every way possible. And in the process, you're touching so many lives for good. So thanks for joining us today. This is Steve Schallenberger, your host, signing off.